My stepmother wanted me to abort my baby, and my father agreed. The ultrasound photo was still warm in my hands when my father told me to get rid of the baby. Not in those exact words, of course. He was too polished for that. Too practiced at making cruelty sound like concern. We just think you should consider all your options, he'd said, his eyes fixed somewhere over my shoulder, unable to meet my gaze. Behind him, my stepmother, Elaine, stood with her arms crossed, her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. I'd spent 4 years trying to earn her acceptance. 4 years of holidays spent biting my tongue, of family dinners where I was treated like an inconvenience, of watching my father transform from the man who'd once called me his princess into a stranger who parroted his new wife's every word. And now at 26, pregnant and alone, I was finally understanding the truth. I had never been part of their family. I had only ever been in the way. The day I found out I was pregnant, I was sitting on the bathroom floor of my tiny apartment, staring at the plastic stick in my trembling hands. 2 pink lines, clear as day. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, a frantic drumbeat that seemed to echo off the cracked tiles. I was 26 years old, recently single after a relationship that had ended badly, and working 2 jobs just to keep my head above water. The father was a man I'd dated briefly, a charming musician who disappeared the moment things got complicated. I hadn't told him about the pregnancy. I hadn't told anyone. For 3 weeks, I'd carried this secret inside me, terrified and alone, trying to figure out what I was going to do. But now, staring at those 2 pink lines, something shifted inside me. The fear was still there. A constant hum of anxiety in the back of my mind. But there was something else too. Something that felt suspiciously like hope. I was going to have a baby. A tiny person who would look up at me with trusting eyes. A person who would be mine, completely and unconditionally. I made a decision right there on that cold bathroom floor. I was going to keep this baby. I was going to figure it out somehow. I was going to be the mother I'd never had. My own mother had died when I was 12. Cancer, swift and brutal, taking her from me before I'd even finished middle school. After that, it had just been me and my father. We'd been a team, the 2 of us against the world. He'd held me when I cried, helped me with my homework, attended every school play and parent-teacher conference. I'd believed with the fierce certainty of a grieving child that nothing could ever come between us. Then he met Elaine. She was elegant and sophisticated, everything my mother hadn't been. She wore expensive clothes and spoke in cultured tones. She had 2 children of her own, a son and daughter who were already grown and successful. She swept into our lives like a hurricane, and my father, who had been grieving for so long, was helpless against her force. I was 16 when they married. I stood in the church, wearing a dress I'd bought with my own money because Elaine had forgotten to include me in the bridal party planning. I watched my father exchange vows with a woman who had never once asked me about my mother, who had never once shown any interest in my life. I watched him look at her with the same adoration he'd once reserved for me. From that day forward, I became invisible, not intentionally at first. Just gradually, my father stopped coming to my school events. He stopped calling to check in. When I visited, Elaine would find reasons for him to be busy. Work, social engagements, anything that kept him from spending time alone with me. I told myself it was just an adjustment period, that things would get better once we all found our rhythm. I told myself I was being dramatic, that I was just jealous of the attention Elaine was getting. I told myself I was being a selfish teenager. I was wrong, on every single count. By the time I was 20, I'd stopped visiting altogether. I'd stopped calling. I'd stopped expecting anything from my father. I'd built my own life, made my own friends, found my own way. I'd convinced myself I didn't need him anymore. But when I looked at that ultrasound photo, I realized I still wanted him. I wanted him to be proud of me. I wanted him to hold my hand and tell me everything was going to be okay. I wanted him to be the father he used to be, before Elaine had filled his head with her poisonous words. I called him the next day. My hands were shaking as I dialed his number, my heart pounding with a mixture of hope and dread. "Dad?" I said when he answered. "I need to tell you something. I'm pregnant." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear Elaine's voice in the background. Muffled but insistent. "That's unexpected," my father finally said. His voice was careful, measured, not the warm, excited tone I'd been hoping for. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," I said, my voice cracking. "I had a doctor confirm it. I'm about 8 weeks along." Another silence. I could feel the distance between us. The years of neglect and indifference that had grown into a chasm I didn't know how to bridge. "We should talk about this in person," my father said. "Come over for dinner on Saturday. We can discuss your options." Your options. The words hung in the air like a threat. I'd wanted him to say congratulations. I'd wanted him to say he was happy for me. Instead, he was talking about options. I should have said no. I should have hung up the phone and never looked back. But I was desperate. Desperate for his approval. Desperate for his love. Desperate to believe that somewhere inside him, the father I'd once known still existed. I went to dinner on Saturday. The house was exactly as I remembered it. Beautiful and cold, decorated in Elaine's impeccable taste. Every surface was pristine. Every corner immaculate. There was no evidence that a family lived here. No photographs on the walls. No clutter on the counters. No warmth. Elaine greeted me at the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Rebecca," she said. air kissing my cheek. You look well, tired, but well. I followed her into the dining room, where my father was already seated at the head of the table. He stood when I entered, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the old him in his eyes. But it was gone as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by that careful, measured expression he'd worn on the phone. The dinner was excruciating. Elaine dominated the conversation, talking about her children's accomplishments, her upcoming charity gala, her recent vacation to Europe. My father nodded along, contributing the occasional, "That's nice," or "How wonderful." I sat in silence, pushing food around my plate, waiting for the moment when we would finally address the elephant in the room. It came after dessert. Elaine cleared her throat delicately and folded her hands on the table. "Rebecca," she said, her voice sweet and poisonous. "Your father and I have been talking. We're very concerned about you." Concerned about me? The phrase felt like a slap. She'd never been concerned about me before. She'd never been concerned about anything except herself. "You're young," she continued. "You have your whole life ahead of you. You're working 2 jobs, living in that tiny apartment. A baby would be irresponsible." I looked at my father, searching for any sign of objection. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Elaine," I said, my voice shaking, "this isn't your decision. It's mine." "I'm just trying to help you," she said, her tone dripping with false sympathy. "Sometimes the best decisions are the hardest ones. You need to be practical. You need to consider your future." Her future is exactly what I'm considering. My father finally spoke. "Rebecca, your stepmother is right. You're not in a position to raise a child. You have no support system. You have no financial stability. It would be selfish to bring a baby into this situation." Selfish. The word hit me like a physical blow. I was being selfish for wanting to keep my baby. "I'm not going to abort my child," I said, my voice rising. "I'm going to keep this baby, and I'm going to find a way to make it work." Elaine sighed, exchanging a look with my father. "Rebecca, we're just trying to help you. If you insist on going through with this, you'll have to accept the consequences. We won't be able to support you." I looked at my father, my eyes burning with unshed tears. "Dad, please, don't do this. I need you. I need my family." My father finally met my eyes, and what I saw there broke my heart. Not love, not sympathy, just a cold, calculating distance that told me everything I needed to know. "Rebecca," he said, his voice flat and final, "we've made our position clear. If you choose to keep this baby, you'll be making that choice alone." I don't remember leaving the house. I don't remember driving home. One moment, I was sitting at that cold, beautiful dining table, staring at my father's indifferent face. The next, I was in my tiny apartment, curled up on my threadbare couch, sobbing into a throw pillow that smelled like the cheap fabric softener I'd bought on sale. The ultrasound photo was on the coffee table, staring up at me. My baby. My tiny, perfect baby who was no bigger than a bean. I reached out and touched the image, my fingers tracing the blurry outline of the little life growing inside me. "You're going to be okay," I whispered. "I'm going to make sure you're okay." I spent the next week in a fog of grief and determination. I called my best friend Delia and told her everything. She showed up at my door with a box of donuts and a fierce hug that made me cry even harder. "Your father is a coward," she said flatly, "and Elaine is a monster. You're going to be an amazing mother, Rebecca. I'll help you. We'll figure this out together." I loved Delia in that moment. I loved her for not hesitating, for not judging, for just showing up. But I still felt the weight of my father's rejection pressing down on me. I still felt the sting of his words, the coldness of his gaze. I didn't sleep much that week. Between the morning sickness and the anxiety, my body was a battleground of hormones and stress. I threw up every morning, my body rebelling against the stress and the pregnancy. I lost weight I couldn't afford to lose. I looked in the mirror and saw a stranger staring back at me. But I kept going. I kept going to work. I kept going to my doctor's appointments. I kept saving every penny I could, building a tiny nest egg for the baby. I started looking into childcare options, into government assistance programs, into anything that might make this impossible situation slightly more possible. And then the letter arrived. It was in my father's handwriting, formal and distant, like a business letter rather than a communication from a father to his daughter. I opened it with trembling hands, already knowing it would contain nothing good. "Rebecca, after careful consideration, we have decided that it would be best for everyone if you took some time to reflect on your choices. We believe that your decision to keep this child is impulsive and ill-advised. We hope you will reconsider. In the meantime, we will be taking a step back from our relationship. We feel it's important for you to understand the consequences of your actions. We cannot, in good conscience, support a decision that we believe is detrimental to your future and to the future of this family. We love you, and we only want what's best for you." Dad, I read the letter 3 times, each pass making the words sting more deeply than the last, taking a step back. Consequences of your actions. What was I, a child being sent to my room? A delinquent being punished for bad behavior? This wasn't my father. The man who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd bandaged my scraped knees, who'd held me when I cried over my mother's death. That man wouldn't write a letter like this. That man wouldn't abandon his pregnant daughter. But that man was gone. In his place was a stranger who echoed his wife's words, who looked at me with cold indifference prince, who had chosen a new family over the one he'd promised to love and protect. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. I didn't cry. I'd used up all my tears. All that was left was a cold, hard resolve. 2 months passed. My pregnancy progressed, my belly growing rounder with each passing week. I found a midwife who offered sliding scale payments. I found a daycare center that had a scholarship program for low-income families. I found a support group for single mothers, women who were navigating the same treacherous waters I was. I wasn't thriving exactly, but I was surviving. And every day I felt my baby move inside me. A flutter, then a kick, then a somersault that made me laugh and cry at the same time. I was 4 months along when I received another letter. This one was in a different handwriting, Elaine's. I almost threw it away, but something made me open it. Rebecca, we've had some time to think, and we've come to a decision. We understand that you're determined to go through with this pregnancy. While we don't agree with your choice, we're willing to offer you an alternative. If you agree to place the baby for adoption, we will cover all your medical expenses. We will also provide you with a generous settlement that will allow you to get back on your feet. We've already spoken to an adoption agency, and they have families ready to take the baby. Think about it. This is the best option for everyone involved. You can start fresh, and the baby can have a better life than you could ever provide. Elaine? I stared at the letter, my hands shaking with rage. She wasn't offering me help. She was offering me a bribe. She was trying to buy my baby, to erase the evidence of my existence from their perfect little world. I crumpled the letter and threw it in the trash. I didn't respond. I didn't give them the satisfaction of knowing they'd upset me. But the anger stayed. It simmered beneath the surface, a constant reminder of how little I meant to my father and his wife. I channeled it into my work, into my preparations for the baby, into the fierce determination to prove them wrong. I was 5 months pregnant when I had my first scare. I was at work, on my feet for too long, when I felt a sharp pain in my lower abdomen. I doubled over, gasping, and my coworker called an ambulance. The hospital was a blur of fluorescent lights and concerned faces. The doctor told me I was experiencing preterm labor symptoms, that I needed to rest, that I couldn't push myself so hard. Your body is telling you to slow down, the doctor said gently. You need to listen. I nodded, but I was thinking about my rent, about my bills, about the thousands of dollars I still needed to save before the baby arrived. I couldn't afford to slow down. I couldn't afford to rest, but I also couldn't afford to lose my baby. So I cut my hours. I applied for assistance. I swallowed my pride and asked Delia for help. And through it all, I never called my father. I never told him about the scare. He didn't deserve to know. He'd made his choice, and I was making mine. I was 7 months pregnant when Elaine showed up at my apartment. I opened the door and found her standing in the hallway, looking as polished and unruffled as ever. She was holding a gift bag, its tissue paper perfectly arranged. Rebecca, she said, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. I was in the neighborhood. I thought I'd check on you. I stood in the doorway blocking her entrance. I'm fine. You can leave now. I just want to talk, she said, her smile never wavering. I brought you a gift for the baby. I looked at the gift bag, my heart pounding with suspicion. You don't get to do this, I said. You don't get to show up here and pretend like you care. You told me to abort my baby. You told me I was being selfish. You can't just... I was trying to help you, Elaine interrupted, her voice sharp. I was trying to save you from making a terrible mistake, but you're clearly determined to go through with this, so I'm trying to make the best of a bad situation. Then leave, I said, my voice cold. There's nothing you can give me that I want, and I don't need you to make the best of anything. I've been doing just fine without you. I closed the door in her face. I leaned against it, my heart pounding, my hands shaking, and for the first time in months, I cried. Not because I was sad, not because I was angry, but because I realized with a clarity that cut through me like a knife that I was free. I no longer needed my father's approval. I no longer needed Elaine's acceptance. I had my baby, I had my friends, and I had myself, and that was enough. My daughter arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in late August, after 18 hours of labor that left me exhausted and exhilarated in equal measure. The moment I heard her first cry, the moment they placed her on my chest, I understood something that had eluded me my entire life. Love wasn't something you earned. It wasn't something you had to prove yourself worthy of. It was something you gave freely, without conditions, without expectations. It was something you chose. I named her Nora, after my mother, the mother who had loved me fiercely and unconditionally, who had never once made me feel like I was anything less than perfect. I looked at her tiny face, her wrinkled brow, her perfect little fingers, and I made her a promise. I would never make her feel like she wasn't enough. I would never make her compete for my love. I would never abandon her, no matter what. The first few weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and endless feedings. Delia was a lifesaver, showing up with meals and coffee and a willingness to hold Nora while I showered or napped. My coworkers sent flowers and cards. My midwife checked in regularly. I had a support system, I realized. A real one that I'd built myself, one that I could rely on. And then, 3 weeks after Nora was born, I got a text from my father. It was the first communication I'd had from him since the letter. Congratulations on the baby. I'd like to meet her. Can I come by? I stared at the message for a long time. My heart was pounding, my hands trembling. Part of me wanted to say yes. Part of me wanted to believe that he'd had a change of heart, that he wanted to be part of my life again. But another part of me, the part that had been hurt and rejected and abandoned, wanted to say no. He didn't deserve to meet Nora. He didn't deserve to be part of her life. He'd made his choice, and he'd chosen Elaine. He'd chosen her over me. I called Delia. My father wants to meet Nora, I said. What should I do? Delia was silent for a moment. What do you want to do? She asked. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to let him come. Part of me wants to tell him to go to hell. Then do both, Delia said. Let him come, but set boundaries. Make it clear that this isn't a negotiation. He doesn't get to just show up and pretend everything's fine. He has to earn his place in your life and in Nora's life. I agreed. I texted my father back and told him he could come over on Saturday, but that it would be on my terms. He agreed, and I felt a strange sense of relief mixed with dread. Saturday arrived, and with it, my father. He came alone. Elaine wasn't with him, which was a small mercy. He looked older than I remembered, thinner, with gray hair that hadn't been there before. He was carrying a gift bag, and he looked nervous. Rebecca, he said when I opened the door. Thank you for letting me come. I stepped aside to let him in. Nora's in the nursery. I'll get her. I walked to the nursery, my heart pounding. Nora was asleep in her bassinet, her tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. I picked her up, cradling her against my chest, and carried her to the living room. My father stood when I entered. He looked at Nora, and his eyes filled with tears. She's beautiful, he whispered. She looks just like your mother. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I hadn't expected him to mention my mother. I hadn't expected him to acknowledge her at all. She's perfect, I said. She's the best thing that's ever happened to me. My father nodded, his eyes still fixed on Nora. I'm sorry, he said, his voice cracking. I'm so sorry for everything, for the way I treated you, for the things I said. I was wrong. I was so wrong. I looked at him, and I saw the man I'd once loved, the man who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd bandaged my scraped knees, who'd held me when I cried over my mother's death. He was still in there, buried beneath years of neglect and indifference and Elaine's influence, but he was still there. Why did you do it? I asked, my voice shaking. Why did you let her treat me like that? Why did you abandon me? My father's face crumpled. I was weak, he said. I was so lost after your mother died, and Elaine, she made me feel like I could start over, like I could have a new life. I thought if I just went along with everything, I could be happy. But I was your daughter, I said, the words coming out as a sob. I was your family. How could you just forget about me? I didn't forget about you, he said, his voice breaking. I thought about you every day, but I didn't know how to fix things. I didn't know how to make it right. And every time I tried, Elaine would make it harder. She'd find a reason for us to fight. She'd make me feel like I was choosing you over her. I held Nora closer, feeling her warmth against my chest. You should have chosen me, I said. You should have always chosen me. I know, my father said. I know that now, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for it, if you let me. I looked at my daughter, so tiny and perfect in my arms. She was the reason I'd found the strength to stand up for myself. She was the reason I'd learned to say no. She was the reason I'd built a new life, one that didn't depend on my father's approval. And now, looking at him, I realized that I had a choice. I could hold on to my anger and my resentment and let it poison me for the rest of my life, or I could try to forgive him. I could try to build something new, something better. I'll give you a chance, I said slowly, but it's going to take time, and it's going to take a lot of work, and I need you to understand that if Elaine is going to be part of this, then I'm not. She's not welcome in my life. She's not welcome in Nora's life. My father nodded, his eyes filled with tears. I understand. I'll do whatever it takes. We spent the next hour talking. He held Nora, his hands trembling, his face filled with wonder and regret. He told me about the years he'd missed, the milestones he'd regret not being there for. He told me about the guilt he'd carried, the sleepless nights, the moments when he'd almost called, but chickened out. And as I listened, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly. Not yet, but a beginning. A door opening, just a crack. After he left, I sat on the couch with Nora in my arms. Delia called, and I told her everything. I think I'm going to be okay, I said. I think we're going to be okay. We already are, Delia said. We've always been okay. You just needed to see it. I looked down at Nora, at her peaceful sleeping face. She stirred in my arms, her tiny fingers curling around my thumb, and I smiled. She was my family now, my real family, and I was going to give her everything I never had. A mother who would always be there. A mother who would never make her feel like she wasn't enough. A mother who would love her unconditionally, no matter what. That was my promise, and I was going to keep it.